Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to come back to my lecture from before lunch. One sentence to that. We were studying tunnels in the Alpine rocks. The results, therefore, cannot be transferred easily to a subway construction, to a metro. The metro, where you have the groundwater table to keep up in a big city, maybe like here in Buenos Aires, the situation might be different. So what I was reporting were tunnels in the Alps. We did not do this study on the Vienna metro, for example. So there might be different aspects then to be considered. I just wanted to make that clear because we had a few conversations in the lunch break. Now the topic, what I'm going to talk about, is a pretty hard stuff. And this in the afternoon. So I thought I will walk around a bit in the group, if you allow, and maybe also learn from your side when I'm presenting why is Europe going this direction, to learn what is the Argentinian way. So maybe I am allowed to ask you for your opinion on that regard. We thought it would be useful to tell you the European situation because it's, as you will see in the next minutes, really hard because all the construction site managers have to know what I'm talking about because they are responsible to be in the law. And the law is really not easy. And I will show you just one slide of regulations which the European Union brought up the last years. And all our young engineers or construction site managers should know all of that, but the details, not just the one slide. And this is my goal to show you the next half hour or so. I called the presentation the European and national policies regarding extracted material from tunneling. The point is, you know, we are more than 20 countries in Europe, all coming from complete different mentalities, all coming from complete different legal aspects. And now European Union tries to get, let's say, this regulated for all the Union and brought up new regulations. The construction works, it says, the construction works must be designed, built and demolished in such a way that the use of natural resources is sustainable and in particular ensures the following. First, reuse or recyclability of the construction works, their materials and parts after demolition. So everything has to be designed from the point of view what happens when we demolish it. It doesn't only concern the tunnels, but also civil works. Second, durability of the construction works. That's why our contracts now say, Brenner Base Tunnel, for example, lifetime has to be guaranteed for 150 years. The question is, how can one do that? Third point, use of environmentally compatible raw and secondary materials in the construction works. So here the European Union already states, please think on using secondary materials, not just primary materials, what you were doing the last decades. And they developed a strategy which is called Europe 2020. It's a Union 10-year growth strategy and is about delivering growth that is smart through more effective investments in education, research and innovation. So several points of these are more general. Second, sustainable, thanks to a decisive move towards a low-carbon economy, inclusive with a strong emphasis on job creation and poverty reduction. All in all, strategy is focused on 5 ambitious goals. The one is employment, the next is innovation, then education, poverty reduction, and climate and energy. I would say the highest goal of Europe is to reduce the energy consumption. By the way, I didn't mention that before. That is why railway routes, new railway routes for goods transport are not allowed to get an inclination more than 8 per mil. In earlier times, you know, we went up, made short tunnels, bridges, the tunnels were very short and then went down. Now we are not allowed to bring a design which shows more than 8 per mil, which makes tunnels much, much longer. Of course, that is the reason why our Brenner base tunnel now gets these almost 60 kilometers and the others are 30 kilometers and all, because we are not allowed to bring a design which is steeper than this 8 per mil. The strategy of Europe is this will save energy at the end, because if we operate these tunnels 150 years and every train has to use a lot of energy to climb up very steep and go down very steep, then on the other side, needs a lot of energy. For example, there was a research done of how many goods are transported from Northern Europe to Southern Europe and how many goods are transported from Southern Europe to Northern Europe. And the result was 60% of the goods are transported from Northern to Southern and 40% are transported from Southern to Northern. And this, of course, influences a bit the design alignment of the inclination. And that's why we get now such long tunnels, what we never had before. This, just to be clear, that's why energy is the highest topic of the Europeans 2020 strategy. And we are working on several energy projects, geothermal and whatever. What is the ambitious targets of this 2020 strategy summarized in one slide? A reduction of the greenhouse gas emissions of at least 20% based on a value 1990. Then a 20% of energy consumption to come from renewable resources and a 20% reduction in primary energy use compared with the projected levels to be achieved by improving energy efficiency. Collectively, we know these, when somebody says, do you fulfill your 2020 targets? Everybody knows what we mean by that. Now, maybe we speed up a bit on that. The one goal is a resource-efficient Europe. A resource-efficient Europe is one of the 7 flagship initiatives of these Europe 2020 strategies. We would like to get much more resource-efficient and a low-carbon economy. I don't know if you heard the European Union, I mean, they spread it around at least. There must not be any diesel car after diesel or petrol after 2030. You know, all our car drivers, myself also included, are a little bit nervous what happens after 2030, because all our cars, I would say 2% or 3% are electric cars, but the rest is diesel or petroleum. So we'll see if this goal will be kept. This recognizes at least that natural resources underpin our economy and also quality of life. Continuing our current patterns of resource use is not an option. So not considering all of that is not an option. That's very clear. Increasing the resource efficiency is the key to secure growth and jobs, is stated, and will potentially bring major economic opportunities, improve productivity, drive down the cost, and boost competitiveness. These flagship initiatives, as it is called, for a resource-efficient Europe provides a long-term framework for actions in many policy areas supporting policy agendas in climate change, energy, transport, industry, raw materials, agriculture, fisheries, and of course also the regional development. These flagship initiatives connect policies related to resources such as the roadmap for a resource-efficient Europe and a raw materials initiatives. So there are years which passed already where research projects were only given to the universities or also companies if you had shown that this is meeting the point of resource-efficient Europe or a raw materials initiative. That's why we as tunnel chair were forced to go in this direction and not only on starting and design what we did before. Now, on 21st December 2005, the European Commission proposed a thematic strategy on the sustainable use of natural resources used in Europe. The objective of this strategy is to reduce, of course, the environmental impacts associated with resource use, and to do so in a growing economy. Focusing on the environmental impacts of resource use will be a decisive factor for helping the EU to achieve sustainable development. Ultimately, the goal is to move European economics towards the situation in which growth objectives are met by using natural resources more efficiently without further eroding the natural resource base. Now, to achieve this objective, this strategy includes the following: improve our understanding and knowledge of the European resource use, its negative environmental impact and significance in the European Union and globally. Develop tools to monitor and report progress in the European Union also, and of course the member states and economic sectors. Foster the application of strategic approaches and processes both in economic sectors in the member states and encourage them to develop related plans and programs. Raise awareness among stakeholders and citizens of the significant negative environmental impact of resource use. This strategy will enable knowledge of resource use in the economy to be brought together quicker and more easily. Do you think a construction company will do that from their perspective? They will spend money to develop processing units, to do that on the construction side? We learned no. We learned it is the client's decision. If the client says, whatever they say, I ignore, we will have absolutely no movement. What I feel is the younger generation, the students which are now coming up, which are now 20, 25, they have a complete other view of the world, but completely different. And they will really go on that, and they are not happy with the older generation who is ignoring that. The students come up and say, why is this tunnel still bringing this material to a deposit? Isn't it a clear decision of European Union and so on? So what we feel is the younger generation has much more drive in environmental aspects, even if they study civil engineering. This is what we observe. Now I come to this big amount of regulations which we have to deal with. And this is the hard thing for everybody who is working in the business now, because it is checked by the ministries if they fulfill it. And it's not easy, also not for the students now, to know everything what is coming up from this union. And one of these is the Waste Framework Directive. This Waste Framework Directive was signed on behalf of the European Parliament and the Council in 2008. And it sets the basic concepts and definitions related to the waste management and lays down waste management principles, such as the polluter-based principle and the waste hierarchy. You have to imagine in earlier times it was the duty of the ministry, and now it goes to the, as it says in the law, polluter-based principle. If the polluter makes a mistake, so if the construction site manager makes a mistake, there is a kind of police who comes not to somebody but to the construction site manager, and the fine is directly going to the construction site manager, not to the boss, not to anybody, but to the construction site manager. So he cannot say, sorry, I didn't hear about the Waste Framework Directive, never heard about it. Because it's like if you drive your car and you go much more than allowed, you as a driver pay. And that's what they changed, and this is hard for the generation who is now construction site manager, because it's hard to understand what is written, because these are legally texts. And you know, a text which is written by a lawyer is normally quite hard to understand for us as a technician. This is the first point. That's why we, a group in Austria, sat together and translated, even if it was in German, we translated the text written by the lawyer for the construction site managers. There's now a guideline which is including all these laws in, of course, the name is the same than the law is, but it explains the law in a much easier language, so that we don't make too many mistakes on that. Our next point is, my first question, maybe I walk around because it's after the lunch break, everybody maybe is tired. May I ask you, is there also such a regulation here in Argentina? May I ask you? Is there, because maybe you were early enough now to avoid the mistakes. We did, because if somebody of us, I mean the clients, majorly the clients, or also the construction industry, would have observed what they are doing there, they would have been able to block it or to bring it in a way that it is, we can live with that on the construction site. The next point is the European Waste Catalogue. The European Waste Catalogue was developed through the Waste Framework Directive and has been amended since its original version to include classifications for the wastes. I learned at that time tunnel excavation material is a waste. And I asked, why are we a waste? And the simple formulation of the lawyer was, you are building a tunnel from A to B, from one city to another city, from one point to another. You are not doing that tunnel because you are interested in getting mineral resources out. You are interested to build a tunnel from A to B to improve the infrastructure, and the material which is in this area, you would like to get rid of. And there is a very simple sentence which the lawyer formulated. Everything what somebody wants to get rid of is automatically a waste. And it doesn't matter if it's valuable or not, but if you, as a tunnel engineer, would like to get rid of something, it is a waste. And then we said, yeah, but gentlemen, this can only be a mistake. The European Union gave us the answer, yeah, why do you complain? You are speaking of such a little amount. It will not be a big problem. And then they asked for the study, okay, what is the amount of waste the tunnel engineers produce? And then they got such a number and they said, oops, maybe we did a mistake. And maybe we have to repair it. But to repair something which is already spread around all the European Union into the nations is really hard. That's what we learned. Each waste now gets a 6-digit code and is controlled by this kind of police. They are coming from the ministry. And has this list of waste has a direct link to the waste definition, and is divided into 20 chapters. And everything what you produce must fit into these 20 chapters. And we had to learn as tunnel engineers that we are waste producers, and that's why we have to follow all the waste regulation which is available. It doesn't matter if you bring the waste from your house to somewhere, or you bring your waste from your tunnel to somewhere. You have to follow the same rules. And now it's not easy to change that, because even if you present your tunnel excavation material for free to the industry for the moment is not interested to take your waste, because then they are waste-producing industries, because they deal with the waste. You know, a company which gets raw materials from a mine, then processes this and makes products out of it, never touches these legal issues with waste. But if you are getting in touch with waste, you get, you are a waste treating company. And in the population, a waste treating company has a negative touch. This is a problem. The companies who are not dealing with waste, because they are getting mineral resources from the mining, they say, we don't want to get in touch with the name waste. You know, this is a psychology, even if it's the best granite or best material. Okay, and of course the construction site managers now have to know, okay, in which category of these 20 chapters is my waste? And that's why I have to treat this waste in these and these rules, because after this European Waste Catalogue, there are many rules following for each of these 20 chapters. And if you are the construction site manager, you have the problem to organize your construction site, and static problems, but now you have a problem more. You have to follow your lines of these waste chapters. Then the European Union brought up a landfill directive. The landfill directive was intended to prevent and reduce the adverse effects of landfilling of waste in the environment. In particular, of course, on surface water, groundwater, soil, air, human health. I mean, the idea is good. We shouldn't put any material anywhere. So the idea was not so bad. And we, as tunnel engineers, we put up a lot of deposits which are still there from the past. The directive aims to achieve this by encouraging waste minimization and increased level of recycling and recovery of waste, because landfilling is nowadays really expensive. And I have some numbers for you then in the next following slides. What is landfilling? What is the cost for landfilling? The decision on the acceptance of waste at landfills establishes criteria and procedures for the acceptance of waste at landfills in accordance with the principles set out in the landfill directive. So it's very hard to get an area nowadays for tunnel excavation material, because it's not tunnel excavation material, it's not mineral resource, it's a waste area which you have to get from somebody who owns the land. And it's one of the hardest points. Then we have the Construction Products Directive. The aim of this Construction Products Directive was to remove technical barriers to trade in construction products between the member states in the European Union by harmonizing national laws with respect to the essential requirements. The question is, what can I make out of a tunnel excavation material, for example, what product? There has to be a clear directive, what requirements have to be fulfilled, and it cannot be that the requirements, let's say in Slovakia, are others than in Hungary, are others than in Austria, and so on. And by the way, we are not allowed to bring a waste out of the country. So the waste, for the Brenner base, which I mentioned several times, is a good example. So we are building these 57 kilometers, but there's a border in between, Italy, Austria. So we are not allowed to bring the excavated material, which, let's say, we come from Austria underground to Italy. We would not be allowed to take the waste what we dig out in the Italian side of this project and bring it to a deposit or to the industry in Austria. So it was very clear we have to split the project at the border because no water must come from Austria to Italy, nor from Italy to Austria. No waste, no excavation material has to be brought from one nation to the other. Is forbidden, is legally forbidden. When they wrote the directive, I'm sure they didn't think on such a project, which is an international project. Because if they would have thought on that, they wouldn't have written that. As a mistake, could be repaired, in my opinion, easily by the lawyers, but it's hard to get it done from the lawyers' point of view. They say solve the problem on a technical point of view. The law is the law. An additional objective of this directive was to standardize the manufacturing of construction products within the European Union, whereby the directive did not aim to harmonize these regulations. It was to harmonize the tests. And here I am at a point which I think is very good to be done. For example, to harmonize the tests. Because, for example, if we do a uniaxial compressive strength test, and we compare these tests, let's say, with a test done here at the university or laboratory in Argentina, it would be good if the test which we do is completely done in the same way. So if I take the UCS as an example, the velocity which the force is brought up on the sample should be the same. The diameter of the sample should be the same. The length should be everything should be the same. This was the intention of the European Union. Please, your tests, standardize it. One procedure how to make the tests. Not yet now on the rock mechanics point of view, in this point on the waste regulation point of view. So if we test the waste in Austria, it should be the same done in all the countries. A next guideline or law, construction products regulation. The construction works must be designed, built and demolished, I already mentioned, in such a way that the use of natural resources is sustainable and in particular ensures the following. First, reuse of recyclability after demolition, this is the major point, durability of the construction works, and use of environmentally compatible raw and secondary materials. The point which was pretty new at that time was after demolition. Who of us thought before of that regulation, what happens with my tunnel after they demolish it? Yeah? Nobody, I think. And you cannot get further in your design with the ministry if you cannot show what happens with this material when you demolish it. Is it then a very special waste, or what happens with that? For example, one suggestion was to build the inner linings using slags of the steel factories. Why not? If there is no, let's say, material coming out when the water runs through, why shouldn't we use these slags? And there are lots of slags which are going to deposits for the moment. But the ministry asks, okay, and when we demolish the inner lining, what then? Do we then have big deposits? So it's forbidden for the moment. The next law is the REACH. REACH is a regulation. Every letter in this REACH has a separate meaning. It is a registration, evaluation, authorization, restriction of chemical substances. It provides an improved and streamlined legislative framework for chemicals. Now we could say, and what is it, why do we have to read that? Yeah, when we drill and blast, for example, a tunnel, we bring in chemicals. And the chemicals are then in our waste. And that's why REACH is concerning us. REACH places the responsibility for assessing and managing the risks posed by the chemicals to the user in the industry instead of the public authorities. So you use any explosives, so you have to sit together with the explosives factory and say, okay, what do I bring into my excavated material then if I deposit that? So it's not a public authority responsibility, it is a user's responsibility. I mean, the good point on that is that it drove a bit the blasting factories, for example, to develop blasting materials which can be used in a better way. So the industry reacted already on that. REACH requires the most dangerous chemicals to be replaced, which is also a good point. So all the things have also a good point. The Chromium Directive reports on the allergic contact dermatitis, following that we had, let's say, ill people because they got in contact with the cement products. That's why they wrote this Chrome directive to get rid of that, and Shotgrid changed a lot because of that. It restricts the marketing and the use of cement and cement-based preparations where they contain more than 2 parts per million soluble chromium. So this changed, of course, also the industry a bit. Then the Environmental Impact Assessment Directive ensures that environmental consequences for projects are identified. This directive outlines which project categories shall be made subject to this directive, which procedure shall be followed, and the content of the assessment. The environmental impact assessment shall identify, describe and assess the direct and indirect effects of a project on the factors human beings, soil and water, cultural heritage, the interaction between the factors which are mentioned above. This was just a short summary of directives which came out, and all our construction site managers, let's say leaving the university, you get in such a job, you must be clear that a kind of police, it's not called police, but it is a kind of police, is coming on your construction site, putting the paper on your table and say, okay, how did you fulfill that on your construction site? And this is really a new, but is very strictly, let's say, controlled and makes, let's say, it helps to go a little bit more in the environmental friendly construction sites. Next point, what I wanted to show you now is there are national policies. So we have the guidelines coming from Brussels, and now the countries are able to do their own guidelines, which are allowed to be more strict than the regulation from the Union. But they must at least fulfill these minimum requirements. But you can be more strict than that. Every country is allowed to be more strict. And I go through some of them. And please, these are just examples. For example, product-specific restrictions. Netherlands has a specific legislation covering the reuse of aggregates in a form of the soil quality decree. The aim of this decree is to prevent pollution of soil and surface water. Under this decree, building materials must meet special requirements. The list of the requirements in this ministerial regulation distinguishes between the molded building materials, such as concrete, bricks, and the others. They did that, the Netherlands did that, because they say the leaching is very different of molded and unmolded products, but it's only in Netherlands. It's, for example, not in Austria, it's not in Italy, wherever. It's there. There they said European Union is not strict enough. Responsible sourcing standards. For example, in the UK, the standard responsibility sourcing of construction products has been published to enable construction product manufacturers to ensure and then prove that their products have been made with constituent materials that have been responsibly sourced. It's only valid in UK. The standard describes a framework for the organizational governance, supply chain management, and environmental and social aspects, and so on. UK Contractors Group target that 75% were sustainable and responsibly sourced by 2015. The different regulations makes it a little bit more hard for, companies working in other countries. Because if you, as, let's say, Portuguese company go to UK, you have to know what is the UK's regulation there and where are they more strict on things what the European Union wrote. Waste framework policies, Belgium. Belgium is very special because in Belgium you have two countries in one, the Wallonians and the Flanders. And they have special regulations in their countries. Belgium says the European policy instruments have only played a secondary role as Flanders was early in adopting more stringent waste legislation. So Belgium had that already before. Finland. Finland's waste legislation influences the national waste legislation accordingly. The most important driver is the National Waste Plan of Finland, as it says actions and targets for reducing construction and demolition waste. The target which was set for 2016 was that at least 70% of all construction waste will be recovered. And 70% is a quite high number. We, for example, in Austria, would never reach that. But this is a national waste plan. The waste framework policy, Germany example. The waste framework directive can be considered as a driver on the national waste policies. The European directive triggered the draft for a new act for promoting closed substance cycle waste management. This draft transposes the European Waste Framework Directive into German law and harmonizes the definitions between the European Union and Germany. Luxembourg, very small, it's only 30,000 people living there. It is obligatory to reuse inert materials according to accompanying documentation on public applicants for road construction or other works. So there it is obligatory, but it's very small. Definition of waste. Waste is not waste. E.g. Austria. Potential recyclables remain waste until they, or materials recovered from them, directly substitute resources or products produced from primary resources. So, if you cannot show that you substitute something in our country, it keeps waste, whatever product it is. Finland, there are no specific regulations on that concerning the distinction between waste and byproducts. It would, for example, in Austria, it would make life much more easy if tunnel excavation material would be named a byproduct. A byproduct in the law is something which you get by manufacturing something. For example, when you produce a steel, you get a slag. And the slag could be a byproduct because it's used for anything else. In our terms, we build a tunnel and the excavation material is a byproduct because we get it automatically when we build a tunnel. It's not allowed. So you see the different views of the nations. Landfill regulation is an important driver towards better management of construction and demolition waste. All member states have transposed the provisions of this directive. So landfill is European-wide the same. Now I wanted to show you a little bit the prices, the cost, what you have if you landfill something. In Austria, for example, the average price for landfilling is in between 60 and 130 euros per ton. Is only for depositing, is not including getting the land, is not including building this deposit. Yeah? It is just, you have to give the ministry this amount, depending on what material it is exactly, 60 to 130. This is, of course, a little bit a driver to reuse the material. Belgium. Belgium has, as I said, two parts, Flanders and Wallonia. In Flanders, in Belgium, average net price is 50 euros per ton. In Wallonia, it is between 40 and 80 euros per ton. You see, Austria is much more expensive for depositing for the moment. Czech Republic. The net fee is about 19, so it would be perfect if we could bring our excavation material waste to the Czech Republic, which is, of course, forbidden, but would make our projects much less costly, but is forbidden. Denmark. Denmark has an average net price between 10 and 95. Estonia. Average price 55 euros per ton. It's always per ton. If you calculate the 17 million of the Brenner base by a density, let's say, of 3, we have 17 times 3, we have 15 million tons, and multiplied by this cost, then you know what is the cost for depositing without building the deposit and without paying for the land. Construction and demolition waste. In 1990, a voluntary agreement was reached between the Ministry of Economy and the Federation of Construction Industries to increase the recycling quotas to the construction industry. I mean, it is driven by this cost, of course. And in Germany, I would say, is the same. In Netherlands, in 1997, a waste substances decree banned the landfilling of recycled building and demolition waste. The ban was subsequently extended to include combustible building and demolition waste. Landfilling in Netherlands is absolutely unattractive because of the high landfill tax. But it varies in such a broad way that I cannot give you the numbers because there are so many parameters in. Secondary raw materials, we say if we could build up secondary landfill deposits, secondary raw materials, there is already now a guideline which we published in 2015. The guideline for recycled building materials published by the Austrian Construction Materials Recycling Association gives a guidance for the processing of these components. In Sweden, the use of waste for construction purposes is environmentally hazardous activity under the Ordinance of Environmentally Hazardous Activities and Public Health. Construction and demolition sites regulations and standards. Spain, for example, 2008 puts an obligation on the generator of construction and demolition waste to include in the construction plan a study of the management of the construction and demolition waste generated on the construction site concerned. It was this year where Spain built lots of tunnels. Resource extraction, Belgium is an example. The Belgian policy on raw materials and mineral planning is the responsibility of the regional government, completely different than Austria, for example. The federal government only provides a policy on related environmental issues. In the Flemish region, provinces are extraction permission authorities for large and small exploitations. And in the Walloon region, extractions of any size are permitted by the municipalities. So you see the different ways of getting an improvement for that. And in Germany, the first alternative describes a substitution of natural resources by production of secondary resources from waste. The second, the utilization of the material properties of waste for the original field of application. And the third, a substitution of natural resources for fields other than the original field of application. I think this is my last point, resource efficiency. Most European countries try to follow these resource efficiency programs. In Germany, in 2010, the Federal Ministry for the Environment started to prepare a national resource efficiency program. The main focus is to be to get a minimization of impacts on the environment, of course, and up to now the topic of resource efficiency has several strategies where I don't want to run through. We have in Europe now 3 guidelines. The French have, I think it was written by, it's written by AFTES. The Austrian, by the Austrian construction industry, and the Swiss one. We did that, as I mentioned at the beginning, to make all of these legal texts available for the engineers sitting on site. Conclusion, there is a strong focus, as you might feel after this presentation, for resource efficiency in Europe. It is one of the flagship initiatives, and all the other things I think I have mentioned which are in the conclusions. This presentation was just to show you what is going on, why are we going so much in this direction, and if you have the possibility, if it starts in your ministries to go in the same direction, maybe you can avoid the one or the other mistake and make it not so complicated than we have, because our feeling is there are too many directives, and some directives are overlapping and some directives are not meeting the others. So that is really hard for the colleagues sitting on the construction site to fulfill everything what is written in there. This is my point, what I wanted to transfer with this presentation. Thanks for listening. It was a very dry, hard stuff, I know that, but we thought it is worth to show you how the situation in resource efficiency is going on in Europe. Thanks for your attention, and questions are welcome.